So I've been working on this new composition. I'm using this photo to do a lot of the trees, negative space. I want rocks down here that fade off into water. And so I have this nice S curve coming through the composition, and there's leading lines back here. And this is going to be all water with some really interesting color, I think. And then I have the mountains that are going to fit in here just ever so nicely. And so this is the picture of the girl that I'm using to get her just right. And just building up the different things I want to happen here. I think I'm going to make there's going to be a tree back here, and I'm going to bring some branches down. So I'm trying to plan everything out. I'm trying to get everything to work for me before I really start laying on paint. Some people like to lay in different shapes and values and stuff. I really like being able to work out detail a little bit more. I have the girl, and then I have all these nice trees and some shapes that are happening back here that I want to try to get in here. So we got a trunk coming up, and then another log. Put the log in here somewhere. And then this is going to be lots of shadows. So the light is coming in from this direction, and it pretty much fits with the girl who's going to be in shadow. And so I love all these little shadow shapes. I was doing a practice drawing video of my front yard and stuff. And it had a lot of fun shadows, and I thought, oh hey, there we go, that would be perfect to have these shadows coming out, little dappled light coming through the tree up here, running into the stones that I want to have in the water. And I've done these stones before in another painting that I really like how that turned out. And so I'm trying to have all this dappled light coming in. I want to plan some of that out ahead of time. Sometimes it seems like if I don't plan it out, it just doesn't happen very well. And then I have these branches. I have this shape here. Mud coming in here, and some of this stuff that happens here. Trying to work out a lot of the issues here ahead of time. And I think it's all working. I'm really happy with it. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to keep this a bucket or if I'm going to make this a stump. I'm thinking maybe I should just make it a stump. That would go along with the overall theme of mountains and things like that. So I'll get started doing a little bit of, start doing some of the painting. I don't know if I'll start with the girl or if I'll start with the negative space. Maybe a little bit of both up here. I want to try to define my values in this face before I decide what the values out here are going to be, which are going to have to be a lot brighter, and bring it up because she's going to need to be more shadowed. We'll see how that works. In here. Shadow like that. So I'll start painting this now, I think. I think I'm all set. So I've been working on blocking out this figure here, and everything's starting to come together. I decided to go for the figure right away rather than wait and have the background, mostly because I get a little impatient, and the figure is what I enjoy doing the most, and so I guess I'm having fun first, and then I have to do the hard stuff later on, or more boring things of plants and trees and things like that. But you know, where you start doesn't always matter. A lot of people with landscapes would start in the negative space, you know, building the distance and the atmosphere and stuff like that. You know, I'd like to get the figure roughed out and then build in the atmosphere. Then if I have any problems with the figure, you know, it's a little easier to handle. And so I'm just working on highlights and shadows and color. You know, this is just my first layer, so everything will get more interesting as it goes along here. Oops, a little messy there. You know, if you pick up the wrong color, you know, don't worry about it, you know, because you know, like that's way too dark. But can always lighten it as we go here. You know, and this is just the first layer. There's going to be multiple layers on this face, trying to get things to work out a little more. You know, and right now, and I like to put it on fairly thick. You know, so if you look at the brush here, you know, it's pretty heavy as far as getting a, you know, interesting highlights and shadows. So the brush works, you know, getting there. So I'll show you a little more as I develop it here. You know, I really like this Viennese red. It does a great job. Well, a lot of colors mix into it really nicely. It just makes it really easy to work it out. So this is pretty exciting part of a painting, is getting started, because you still have, you know, that vision, that dream of what you think it's going to look like, and you haven't messed anything up yet. So it's just fun, you know. This part, you know, well, this is a little muddy, but you know, it's coming along. So I'm just slowly building it up, and I'll start creeping up. Right now I have a lot of good midtones. I don't have the highlights in yet, mostly just midtones and shadows. So far I've been working out, trying to just get all the different planes, and some of it's exaggerated, some of it's, you know, getting closer to where I like it. I mostly have mid-tone and shadow values right now. I don't have a lot of highlight working yet. You know, I have some really strong lines yet here that will get worked down a little bit, so it's not so strong. Okay, let's see if I can get this. You know, I've exaggerated the highlights in midtones because that's probably way too dark, but that's okay. You know, I'm just trying to get my value structure here. I'm thinking about, see, this is probably closer to what it should be. I'm thinking about where the light is coming from, what is light, warm light coming down from above, direct light, or getting reflected light coming off the ground, which might be, the light coming from above might be cool light, the light coming bouncing off the ground in other places may be a little more warmer. So I'm playing with the colors a little bit and how the shadows work, and I'm just having fun with it. This is just, if it's not right, I can always let it dry a little bit and rework it, because this is only the first layer. I know this is just the first layer. This is going to have another whole layer over the top of this with, more colors on top, and then I'm going to start toning things down. So this is just getting things in play, just so I get the gist of everything, and I think, I don't know if I'll work on this. This takes a lot of patience to do all those patterns. It just about drives you crazy. But right now I'm mostly just wanting to get the figure roughed out, and getting it to look how I want it. Try to get the shadows close, and so in some areas I warm up, I put a little red in or orange. I have the raw sienna here for a cool yellow, and so I'm just playing around with colors, and then I can take those and adjust them. Like here I can make this a little bit lighter, and so now what I'm going to do is go back in. Like here's going to need a lot of adjusting yet. There's a lot of subtle things to do in here. It's just really blocked out pretty heavily, and I'll come back in and just add an adjusting value or color, or just to work it. And right now I'm just kind of playing all over the place. I'm not stuck in one area of the figure, and I'm just kind of working my way around it, trying to decide, what all things, like here, this probably shadow needs to come out, or, I could pull that around the cheek a little bit. And I don't want to brush too much, because I want to keep the brushwork pretty lively. And most of this is pretty lively right now. It's not looking too bad. And I like a loose, lively brushwork. You'll see a lot of people that will refine and refine and refine. And, that's great for them. It's just not what I love doing. I love, the heavy brushwork, and allowing that to show through, and I think I appreciate people that refine things, but they could sometimes cut people like me who likes things on the looser side and rougher side, to have our space too. There's a bit of a conflict there. There's probably a little more shadow later there. I like the dark skin tones. You can get lots of different things happening in these dark skin tones. And oops, no, it's too dark. That's okay. Let's just lighten that a little bit. Oh, there. So I like all these dark skin tones. It's just fun. Sometimes some people get things too light, and you lose all these beautiful reds and blues and stuff and greens that are happening in your figure. Allow some of that just to happen. I was playing with this earlier. Oh, yeah, I like that. I like it a little bit warmer in that shadow. That's nice. So I'm going to bring, and it kind of relates reflected light coming back up. So I'm going to make that blue just a little warmer. So it's more of a kind of a purpley color. And again, you know, keeping that things loose and the brushwork loose. Now's the time to do it. So this is kind of where I'm at so far. I'll give you another update in a little while. So I spent most to the last session in working out a lot of the pattern and the detail in the clothing, just because it's a real pain, and just, you know, good just to have it out of my way. And I left things dry a little overnight. You know, I added the stump and part of this tree. This is kind of a visual block, and what it's going to do is I'm going to create the tree coming over with these branches hanging down, and so it'll create kind of a frame for the figure here. And then so I have, you know, right now this is about 1/3. So it's using the rule of thirds, or almost the golden mean. So she's on this section and this, and hopefully that makes for a really good composition. And so if I put a third line here, third line here, third line here, the focal point is the face. So that kind of gets me right where I want to be compositionally. And right now I was going to do a little more detail on, you know, the skin while it's still damp a little bit, and add some color to it. So if you look at it closely here, I'll take the camera down here, and you can look at it closely. You know, you can see how rough this is, you know, but you can see the color, and things are just mostly just blocked out real roughly. And I'll start coming in and redefining everything, you know, to really smoothen things out. And I've got the underline color that I like, and it's working pretty well. So now it's just a matter of continuing the painting, getting some of the negative space in, and working on the rest of that detail. Okay, so today I was working on the figure a little more, smoothing things out, and I started working on trying to decide what I'm going to do with the negative space. So I'm experimenting a little bit with color, and you know, I'm thinking there's so much color going on here, so many warm values, that I need to have some cooler ones off back in here. And I'll probably have some mountains and hills back here that will be a lot cooler, but then I want to bring branches up coming down around this direction that's going to be a lot warmer. So we'll see how this works out. I'm thinking it's coming along pretty good. I decided I did rocks like this going into water in another painting, and I really liked it. It was a lot of work, but it looked pretty cool. So I'm gonna try to do some of that down here with what I'm doing, and we'll see where we end up with a lot of the values. I want to try to get some reflections, because this is going to be all water back here, and this will all be water, reflections, trees, and things like that going on in here. Got some trees, kind of filling in this whole area here. I'm just trying to figure out the shapes. So I have this track that pulls the eye in this way compositionally, and then I'll have kind of this track that comes around, and so your eye will travel through some of this, and I'm going to put a block here. So a block is where you put something visually that blocks the viewer from going out of the composition, and this will force the eye back in to here. So it'll be kind of, your eye will come around, come in here, be blocked, and then come back up through here. And trying to decide how much detail I'm going to throw in here. I like to do lots of fun little details, but we'll see how this goes. So I'll add a little more. Right now I'm just trying to work out where some of this is going to all land. So we'll see. And get the color working together here. So we're just putting in branches here. It's kind of random. And hopefully I'll get some filtered light coming in back through here. Not sure what to do back here. This will probably be more gray, kind of like this, showing coming through part of the bank. And I'm going to make this water, this all water here. Hopefully that'll look right. Just trying to map out where some of this is going to go. Some of these shapes. It's going to be darker there, I think. And I'm not really using a big brush at all yet. I'm just putzing around, just kind of having fun doing this. And just kind of get lost in all the little detail things happening here. Little happy trees. Background. Now remember, trees aren't necessarily just green. So I like to start out with a kind of more neutral color or shadow color in trees, and then drop highlights in on top. And we'll see how these work out. And the closer you get, the more red you add into the tree. Like this has lots of red in. And so a lot of these shadows will be more red. And I'm just going to want this to be a fairly dark shape here to control how the viewer looks at the composition. Adding a few branches, sticks into this. And we'll see how this works out. So here I'm moving in closer so you can see what I've done. This. So these are just shapes. You can see I worked on the face a little more. I smoothed some areas out. I still have some areas here that I probably want to smooth out, make it a little smoother. I like having hands rough and gestural, so I'm pretty happy with how that's going. And so you can kind of see how everything's working together. I was working on this stump here. I'll probably have to wait for this to dry a little bit because this needs to be a lot brighter on top here. And I got a lot of gray in there, so I was mostly doing the neutral value right now. And then you can see all my little pebbles, and I'm going to go down into the water. And then here's my trees and stuff going up into the background. So far, I've got most of the large shapes and values kind of figured out where I want to go here. And now it's just a matter of, I just want to get one good layer down, and then I'll adjust values. Like here, I know this needs to be a lot brighter. This probably could be a little darker. But I'm just trying to get the colors in there that I need. And if I can get the colors and the values close to where I want them to be, I'm thinking this needs to be a little bit darker, and I can add a little more gray in here, and that's going to help that. Okay, that's too red. There we go. Because I want her to stand out. We'll make this part of the mountain somehow. And the composition seems to be working pretty well. I've noticed these triangles here are really good because they point. They help direct the eye. And so I'm going to use those as, I'm going to keep those pretty strong. And I'm just going to make those work for me the best I can. And I'm just trying to get these values to be just right. And then keeping in mind that this is just my first layer that I'm putting on the overall painting. For sure I'm going to do another layer on the figure, and I'm going to do another layer on most of this stuff, trying to get reflections and everything working a little better. Right now it's just rough shapes in here, and I'm pretty happy with a lot of the rough shapes that are happening. But they're getting there, They're starting to work for me. They're making sense, and the painting's starting to pull together a little more, and so that's kind of fun to see how that's working. So I need to add more dark values in these trees. Okay, I'm just gonna start living life dangerously. I'm try to get the feeling of these leaves coming off, or the needles coming off behind this figure. And pull it all off. It's starting to pull in there. Oh, I know this is going to be very dark up here. All these needles hanging down, and I'll have to try to get them to look more needly shape, you know, in clusters. I do want them to mix in with the background a little bit. Right now I've got the figure standing out pretty sharply, and I need to get her to blend in to the negative space a little better. And sometimes that's adjusting the space around her. Sometimes it's adjusting the figure to get the color and the values to work a little better together. And let's see how that works. It's starting to come along here. So I'll show you a close-up of everything I'm doing. So, you know, these are starting, they're just rough shapes right now. You know, and it's getting there. Trying to get these values in this water a little closer to where I need it to be. And I'm liking how the shadows down in front here are working. They're getting the feeling of shadows. I think I need to bring them out a little bit further, maybe into these rocks a little bit, and then try to cool some of this leg here a little bit. It's probably a little bit too warm, but the video is showing it warmer than it actually is. Video is kind of not exactly accurate. So let's see how it goes. So I'll zoom out so you can see there. What's that? That's pretty good. So I worked on this overlying tree thing on top here, and worked on some of this. I need to let some of this stuff dry up a little bit, but the colors and the values and the feeling of light is starting to all feel like it's working in here. I need to work down in this lower area now, and probably cover a lot of this, all that white stuff over there, because that's getting to be real distracting. Once I get the pattern and everything worked in here, then I think I'll have a better feeling of how the light's coming in. I need to do all the little highlights on all these trees here, and then I'll have a good feeling on how well the figure is working with the rest of the landscape. And it's coming along. It's getting there. I usually getting the first layer on's the major thing, and then I can spend, you know, a lot of time tweaking this and getting everything to work together a little bit. And I'm thinking it's looking pretty good. I have you know, the feathers here in her hair are probably too light, and I'll have to go in and work on the values on those You can see that, with the amount of light coming in, that's going to be just too bright there, and it's it's coming along. It's you know having fun. Getting these little feelings of. I'm trying to get that feeling of how this particular tree has these little needle things coming off on them, and it's just a matter of finding the right small brush to create those little highlights. And I think if I hit these highlights really hard, that'll really cause that feeling of light coming in as she's sitting underneath this tree. And a little more light. There we go. And it's just gonna be fun. It's getting there. Okay, I want to try to add maybe a little more yellow into these highlights. Maybe that'll help that a little bit. I'll have to try some yellow. To a really light yellow. That should really brighten it up. Mixed in with that green. Yeah. Just a slight color shift. And so I'm starting to get to a lot of the little details, and my main thought is, I need to adjust how the light's coming in here, and how it's hitting the girl, and I need to cover up all this with some color and stuff, just because it's being real distracting, and I really need to get this section in here, get some color down, so I know, and I have a feeling of, I start having a feeling of how is that looking in here. So I'm gonna come back and you can check it out in a little while. If it's looking a little more successful every time you come back and look at it. And it's fun. You really need to learn to enjoy what's happening. It's just fun watching, smearing the paint around, seeing what you can come up with. And I'll just keep playing with it. Yeah, looking great. So I've been working on patterns, work out how, this is all working. Right now I'm just layering it, layering in color, and then I'll work on value in these patterns. And it's just a matter of, working this out. And so it's getting there. So you see how all that white affect how you see the whole scene. Now with the color in here, this helps you see, the light streaming in, and so it helps create that sense of light in this figure here. And so all these little, the color and stuff tones things down enough to where it starts looking like shadow back here and light coming in. And so you really have to be aware of how these white areas throw off how you see things. And if you know that ahead of time, it becomes a little easier to set it up. So, and it's just a matter of lots of little putsy shapes. Just trying to get all these things to work. And what I'm doing here. Yeah, and it's just takes time to go through all that. And then I'll have to go through all that again because some of these areas need to be lighter where the light is hitting the clothing, and some of these areas need to be much darker, so I need to darken this area here a lot, and underneath here needs to be a lot darker, so it has a shadow shape on this side of the clothing. Right now if you look at it, the color and everything is all flat. It looks like a flat plane, and it's not. You have this fabric that's rolling and having folds and stuff like that. And so what I have to do is come back in now and add shadow to these colors and create those folds in that fabric. I just find it easier just to get the color on there and then modify the color for the shadow. So it's everything we talk about in Painting 101 is you have your midtone, which is the local color, the color of the object. You have your highlight and shadow. And so right now I have the midtone, and so I need to put the shadow in here, and then I'll come in and put highlight to create that feeling of light hitting the figure and making this three-dimensional rather than very two-dimensional pattern that it is right now. So it's coming along, it's getting there, it's getting exciting. As I look at this, it's still too bright, and I haven't done anything with that yet. And I need to work on this corner in this area down here to help feeling of that light coming in and bouncing up, hitting the figure. So it's getting there. I need to make this darker. Some areas down here need to be darker to create contrast. So the closer your objects are to the foreground, the brighter and the more contrast the color is. And the farther away it is, the more gray it is or blue, and the less contrast. And so some of these areas may be a little bit too contrasted here, so I need to tone some of those areas down compared to some of the other ones. And then it's just a matter of working lots of detail in. Then it's just going back over the top of everything again and working the detail. And I'll probably come in and add highlights here, bring up those highlights for the light coming in, hitting the figure. So there'll be certain areas that I need to adjust and pull back and move back and forth. So it's getting there. It's lots of fun. The pattern here really adds a lot of excitement to everything that's going on. So I worked on creating shadows. And so I have a shadow here, and it's all starting to pull together a little better. So it's just a matter of knocking down these really strong values in the color, the chroma here, and it's, you know, getting to just about where I like it. And so I'll you know, it's just about there. And so what I think I'll do is I may jump to a different area now and work on that and leave this sit for a little while and think about it. And there's lots of little adjustments in here that I can do and create, you know, little highlights and different values. You know, some need to be lighter, some need to be darker to help create that feeling of shadow running in these different areas. But it's getting there, you know, it's starting to look pretty good. So I'm glad to have that pattern pulling together finally, because those patterns are always take a lot of trying to organizing and figuring out how to get them to work. And I think I'm finally working out a system to deal with patterns. And patterns are really nice because they create a lot of interest in a drawing or painting. And if you can get them to work for you, it adds that little bit of pizzazz to the painting that you want. And it just makes it a little bit more special compared to if this was just a flat cloth, you know, just a flat pattern going across, you know, her garments and stuff. Now it's just, it adds a lot more. And so I need to add more color and value into this tree here, because right now she's very strong and I need to make her blend in to this to help the composition work our way around, you know, creating a circular, you know, how the eye travels through a painting. And so I want to be able to control that. And so people don't even know what I'm doing, but it really makes sense into how that can all work together. Yeah, it's coming along. A lot of fun. So everything has its first layer on. Everything's covered with some paint, some value, some compositional things, you know, things that I'm working at. And so it's all coming together now. Now it's a matter of I need to go over the top of everything again. Need to go through and make adjustments, make slight changes here and there. Like in here, this needs to be brighter, lighter to bring your eye around. Some areas here need to be adjusted a little bit. I need to still go into that feather up there. I haven't done it all yet, but it's all getting there. far as getting closer to being to the end here. But finishing a painting is always much more difficult than starting a painting. Starting a painting is just fun. Finishing a painting, you have to sit back, consider about, you know, what's going on, you know, and how everything's working visually. If the color's right, and you know, making all these little decisions of just tiny little marks here and there about how this is all going to pull together. So it's getting there. Trying to get that feeling of water in here. It's starting to look like water. It's not quite there yet. You know, the interesting part of this is it's got this interesting green that's happening here. I'm not sure how to get that in there. I know there's some bushes in here I want to put in yet, but I still want to get that flow of water going around the stump, you know, underneath the stump here. Some of this is still too blue. Make it a little more neutral in here. It's too. It's just a matter of trying to go all over these parts. To get them to look like how I want them to be. And some of this has to dry, so I have to sit back and let some of this dry before I can go back in and start bringing up highlights now. I've got most of the neutral tones. I've got some highlights. You know, this is probably about where it's going to be, but I don't have the highlights in here right yet. I want to do a few more highlights on the figure yet to bring that up. You know, there's just little parts here where I need to make adjustments, gray some stuff out here a little more to get that all to look just right. You know, there's some things where I can make it more blue. You know, to try to create some structure into this mountain face here that is hidden behind all this stuff. And that should start looking better. I want to try to get something in here. I don't want this. Need that to have a little more contrast behind there. But it's getting there, looking good, you know. I just have to spend more time stepping away from the painting and looking at it. And I find this is the part that students have the most trouble with, and it just comes with experience. Is stepping away, walking up to the painting, stepping away, walking up to the painting, adjusting it. Okay. So here I'll give you a close-up of everything again. Of how that looks. When you look at it up close, it's just dots and dashes. When you step away from it, it makes more sense. Here we go. especially when you look at the fabric here. It's just trying to create that feeling of light and dark areas in the fabric. And then when you look at all this stuff back here, and that's pretty much it. And then you look at the whole thing. Let's get back a little further. There we go. You get to see how everything's pulling together here. Okay, so I went and did a lot more detail. I worked on the water in here, trying to get it to look more waterish. And I worked on detail all over. And right now it's coming to the point of finishing the painting. And so a lot of it is doing other layers. I'll put more highlights on the figure yet. And I may add a couple of highlights here on the clothing. I decided to add some filtered light coming through here, so the light's coming from behind the figure this direction, and that seems to be making more sense. And so I'm just slowly building up all these little parts, and hopefully they'll start pulling together even more as I go along here. And it's looking pretty good. Some of this just needs to dry a little bit before I add highlights into it, but another couple hours, and I think we'll call this one done, and I'll sign it, and then we'll move on to something probably maybe a little easier this next time. And so I'm just adding little shadows here and there, little details. Like there's a little white snowfield up here they want to hit. It's still a little pretty wet to get another layer over the top of it. But it's getting there. It's starting to look more of how I'd want it to look. Add a little more so it looks like it comes across. Yeah, it's starting to pull together pretty nicely. Good. So I'll blue into that. So I'm just adding little small details, and sometimes that's just enough to make things work. Just little tiny highlights here or there, and I'm just kind of working my way through the whole composition. Trying to create that feeling of the light, and distance, and because I want some of this to be darker. Just adding little. Oops, don't want that to be green. There. little crags in the mountain wall here. And you know, the rocks go different directions, and there's little ledges, and just add a few of those in. Just creating a little more interest in everything. And so it's just a little putsy, playing around, just trying to get the feeling of, you know, wet sand versus dry sand, and maybe a little puddle of water here so it turns slightly blue. You know, and some of the stuff you probably can't see with the video, but you know, I'll bring you in close here so you can take one more look at it. Some of it's warming some of this stuff up. You know, adding a little texture. Sometimes it's just smoothing things out. You know, some areas just need to be a little smoother. Some, it's just adding some interesting brushwork on top of what I have. That just adds a little more fun to it. That's how you do painting. You just do it in stages. You kind of have a process, and you just work your way from the large, you know, things down to all the little small details, and you know, keep your mind on how the light is coming in, and you know, just you know, the form of the figure and things like that, and you know, it's working out. I just need to add a few highlights maybe on this necklace thing and stuff. So I'll pull you closer so you can see some of the detail. So I've been working on rocks down here. And so when you look at these things, they're just little brush strokes up close. But when you pull back, it starts looking like actual rocks of some sort. Isn't that interesting? So you can get up close. They're just little dabs. Little dabs of paint. You know, and hopefully all that adds up and makes sense. So I pull out and you have a painting. How fun is that? So I've done a lot of tweaking of this painting. I've adjusted a lot of the color in here, and I've added a little more detail. Right now I just need to let it dry, probably put it up on a shelf somewhere and look at it for a while, and try to decide if there's any other things I really want to change on it. Otherwise, I'm going to call this one pretty much done. I hope you guys enjoy seeing the progress of this painting. And this is for my students and Emma Renee. And if you like what you've seen, please subscribe and like the YouTube channel, and that'll help me, encourage me to do more. So till next time, you know, enjoy painting.